Hi everyone. So as we've been streaming so many times, like a webinar, we've been not present for quite a long time. So now we come back with I would say with a new webinar, very exciting, like new idea, new thought from Microsoft for startup team. So actually, without taking a long time to get into, I'll welcome Mr. Vikram joining from Microsoft and Malgosia Mazani from Microsoft too. I'll try to give a little bit short introduction about Vikram and Malgosia if I'm not, uh, uh, just forgive me if I do some mistakes. So Vikram started his career at Microsoft SQL Server support, provide consulting service to enterprise SME customer. He then transitioned to product management in the Windows developer ecosystem, working closely with developer and ISVs. It was during these years he discovered his passion for being a customer and partner advocate. He has been running the experiment program since 2016 for Microsoft Cloud Division. His team helps teach and operationalize this customer-centric problem-solving practice across engineering. Vikram identify as an African Indian. It's a good chance to have like an African with us. He was born in Bangalore, India, and raised in Kirwi in the Kapanbet province of Zambia. So this is like short introduction about Vic, and let me just give another introduction about Malgosia. Originally born raised in Poland, she spent like 13 years at Microsoft working across a variety of roles from product development, marketing for products such as Surface, MSN, and Bing, to developer evangelism and starter program. Currently partnering with Vikram on helping engineering team in cloud and AI be more customer focused. Outside of her day-to-day job, Margozia is passionate about diversity and inclusion and accessibility. So welcome everyone, Vic. So welcome Vic and welcome Margozia.
Great. Hi everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, your screen not yet, but we can hear you good. Now your screen is on.
Great. Okay, so I will begin. So thank you very much. Thank you, Abdel, for the wonderful introduction. And both Malgosia and I are delighted to be here to present our seminar around how you can actually build with a customer. So that way you're building for the customer and you are. And we've had a methodology that's been very successful within Microsoft. So we're here to actually share that methodology with you today to kind of just show you how easy it is. And, and that's just going back one. That's really what the title about this is, right? About move from idea-based product planning to collaboratively building with your customer. What we're trying to say is don't build a product based on your idea, but essentially co-create that experience with your customer. As Abdel said, Malgosia and I run this program in Microsoft, even though we work for the Emerging Markets Group. And essentially our charter has kind of been to help culturally transform groups across Microsoft on how they do product and experience development, which is to say how to effectively bring in customer feedback as we build those products and services. And what we're going to do today, Malgosia and I, we will share that framework with you, how simple it is, how cost effective it is, and at the same time, how impactful it can be. So without further ado, this is what our agenda is for the day. We're going to walk you through the experiments methodology, the 4 phases, and there's going to be a call to action at the end and how you can be a part of this as well. So we have all heard from frustrated customers. I'm hoping that is very familiar sight. Unfortunate, but familiar all the same. If you're in an established business, those of you who've attended the call today, you've probably seen this before, and I'm sure it's something you want to avoid in the future. For those of you in startups, early stage companies, I'm sure you're all hoping that you never have frustrated customers like this. But before we start talking about how we can go about minimizing it, let's kind of take a step back and sort of see why this even happened in the first place. Because regardless of the size of your company or what your company delivers, many times we talk about value. We spend our time talking about really fancy value propositions and business models. We focus on features. We obsess over our processes on how we're going to go build something. We say we talk to customers, but are we actually listening to our customers? And it's no wonder sometimes why customers end up being frustrated in the first place. So let's think about things in a different way. Let's put our customer at the center. And how do you do this? Very simple. You just start to validate your value of your business with your customers. A lot of companies, especially those of you who've joined from early stage startups, let's be honest, you've got a fixed amount of resources to build your business, build your products, build your brand, and build your value. So before you start spending these limited resources on an idea, on a great idea that you had, validate the idea first. Before you start building, before you start engaging resources to start coding, before you start going and asking venture capitalists or your friends or your family for money, ask yourself, yes, I've got a great idea, but how do I, as an individual or a small company, go out and validate it? So consider you've got a great idea that you want to take to market, right? For example, maybe as a startup, you want to provide villages and smaller towns safe and portable drinking water in easy to dispose 1 liter bottles for what appears like a very fair price, maybe the equivalent of $1. And I actually just made that up. It sounds like a great idea, and I do believe that there is need for that, right, in a lot of villages around the world. But this doesn't mean that you go in and you start producing it. Instead, validate it, create the value, talk to your potential customers. Your ideas might be validated, so that's great. But you know what? In addition, you may end up getting a whole lot of other insights. For example, they probably love your idea of drinking water in bottles, but they're just not willing to pay that kind of price for it. It's a good thing you found out, right? Given that your production costs would probably be maybe, say, the American equivalent of about 50 cents for each bottle. So it's a good thing you found out that there isn't a market for that particular size. Or they might give you other product ideas, like maybe having smaller bottle sizes or using biodegradable material to package the water. Or you may find out that unfortunately there isn't a market for this, as the core audience that you were hoping to who would buy your product already has 5 or 10 different ways of getting safe and portable water. But the brilliance of what I just kind of described is that talking to customers does not cost you time. So before you go through, it doesn't cost you money. So before you go through a rigorous effort that you're so passionate about and spending months and months in releasing a product and then getting the feedback, instead just start to validate way before. And why? Because that way you can fail fast and you can pivot fast. So you deliver what the market needs and willing to pay to, and it's okay to embrace failure. Because honestly, what's to me, in my opinion, what's better than embracing failure is embracing to pivot, to just be able to open to pivot, to change, and to learn to do it quickly. So everything that we'll cover today will be a plan to do so. And you're going to be amazed, honestly, at how easily it can be done. I'll show you some examples that we've used internally. But before we go there, I want to talk about the methodology itself and how it's been helping us in Microsoft on our journey to culturally transform to being more customer-centric. So our leader, Satya, this is one of my favorite quotes of Satya. He says that constantly, he says we should be a learn-it-all culture. And what does learn-it-all mean? Well, I mean, of course, yes, we all need to learn, but how do we do it? We do it by listening. Listen to those unmet, unarticulated needs of customers. So regardless of whether you're a startup or a founder, whether you're working in an SMB or a large enterprise, the one muscle you should develop is to listen, and that's now more than ever. The art of listening, the art of being customer-centric, and the art of being customer-obsessed. In short, if there's one takeaway from the webinar, Obsess, 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 obsess about your customer. And why? Of course, we see the word customer obsession a lot these days. I'm hoping this isn't the first time you're hearing this word. But what does it mean? Or rather, how does customer obsession really help you? First of all, it helps you understand your customers better. It helps you act faster on the feedback you receive from them. If you're customer obsessed, hopefully you're able to see changes in customer satisfaction and usage. And more importantly, you're able to measure what matters. So if you're in this session today, I'm going to assume it's one of two things. That you've already started the journey of building something amazing, or you're at the beginning of building something amazing. But either way, customer obsession is core to what you do. Regardless of whether you're at a concept stage, regardless of whether you've got a product in the market, you've got to be customer obsessed. You have got to take the time out to understand what that lovable experience for your customer is. And when I say experience, it goes from everywhere: installation, usage, capabilities, ease of use, accessibility, everything. And for those of you attending today where you've got an amazing product that's selling well and you're making money and reviews say it's amazing, etc., let's have a reality check. It doesn't mean it's the best, or it doesn't necessarily mean that it provides your customer the best experience. Your customers could be using your products out of necessity and probably waiting for a better, easier, or cheaper experience. And some examples that I can think of is, for example, a company which does customer obsess is the company we work for, Microsoft. One of the strategic changes we did about maybe 10 years ago was moving to the cloud, which means even if you want to get a Word document, if you want to get Word installed on your computer or something, you don't have to go into a shop or order an Office CD. You no longer necessarily have to meet anyone in person for a meeting. You don't need to go buy a big computer for your data center or to install SQL Server. And that's an example of how customer obsession helped people or companies transform. And personally speaking, there are a few companies that I think did not customer obsess. I'm going to talk about them later and give you some example. But in short, we call it obsession again for a reason. You continuously, with laser focus, you're thinking, you're breathing about the customer. You obsess in excellence, you obsess in delivering capabilities and making sure you're listening to the customer, and you always obsess about giving them the best experience. One thing that yes, sorry. So I'm often asked, right? We get asked this question quite a few times internally and externally, which is, hey, we've been doing this for years, right? We've been building experiences for our customers for years. So whether it's a company, whether it's Microsoft internally, or whether it's external other companies too, why have we had to focus more on customer obsession and customer empathy these last few years? Why did we need to change things, for that matter, even within our company, to set ourselves to be even more customer obsessed? It's because of the realities of the changing world. First of all, we needed to recognize that our customers have diverse needs and wants. Are we being diverse in our perspective, but inclusive in our approach? The second one is my favorite, which is kind of really what the core about this whole presentation is, which is that we needed to talk less about ideas, but instead validate assumptions with customers. Personally, I hate the word idea. And the reason is because it's so easy to fall in love with your own idea. And you go about building a product and spending so many engineering cycles. So instead, let's start calling it an assumption. So that way you automatically want to go validate your assumption with somebody. And then to be able to scale some of these very basic customer connection techniques across the whole team, build the muscle of being customer centric throughout your org. In short, for big companies, it's no longer just the job of user experience. Now, I use the word organization, but please note that it can refer to any company at any stage of any size. So even for those of you on this call who are from startups, please know that user experience is now a shared responsibility. Customer-centric should be an org-wide muscle. And finally, learn the art of capturing objective insights and data at scale. So with all of this taken into account is kind of really what resulted in the birth of the experiments methodology. This would be the elevator pitch, as it says on the screen. Experiments is a lean and agile customer-centered development framework to enable hypothesis-driven learning from customer data through rapid experiments. Now, teams using experiments are normally focused on either improving existing experiences, apps and services, as well as developing greenfield solutions, like as in the case of startups. But in both scenarios, they connect directly with customers and partners to get rapid insights and feedback. It helps us get alignment around user needs and the problems we're trying to solve together. But more importantly, it reduces risk through what we call as rapid iterative hypotheses testing. Now, the experiments can scale. They can be very short release cycles, literally days, or they can go on to like really long quarters or semesters, as we call it internally. But the brilliance about it is two things. A, it's inherently measurable at every phase of development, whether it's a customer problem discovery, whether it's ideation, you've got some potential ideas for a solution, release to a market or growth to market. And the best part is this applies to anything you're building. It's not just for hardware. It could be hardware, software, services, processes, internal operations, whatever you do, as long as there is a customer, internal or external, at the other end. Our experiments methodology, it draws inspiration from lean startup, design thinking, and lean UX. But basically what we did was we kind of combined the best of each into an approach that kind of works in today's times. So this also applies to orgs of smaller types, startups or anything, because the core is, and you're going to hear me say this again and again and again, it all starts with validating your assumption, your hypotheses. So what is a hypothesis? In general, the dictionary definition, I guess, of a hypothesis would be a scientific method in which a problem or a question is identified, relevant data is gathered, and a hypothesis is formulated and empirically tested with an experiment. In the simplest of English, any assumption that can be validated is called a hypothesis. And after you test a hypothesis, there are basically three courses of action. You can reject the hypothesis based upon customer data and create a new one. You can refine the hypothesis and gather more data, or you can just accept the hypothesis as reasonably true with a good amount of confidence and move on to the next step of your development process. You create and test a hypothesis to reduce development and business risk by ensuring you continually learn about your customer needs and how well you're meeting those needs. And of course, you can measure your customer's experience and confidently take action knowing that your decision is grounded in reliable customer data. So when you think about our experiments methodology, it is about, as I showed you in one of the earlier slides, giving a diverse audience a voice, identifying and validating your assumptions, and actively listening to users. But I also want to tell you what it is not. It is not just about doing what users say. It's not about impeding the process of innovation and creativity. And it's really not just about sitting with your customers and discussing specs and troubleshooting. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying any of these on the right side of the slide is not important. But all I'm saying is when you think about our particular methodology where we're trying to build that experience, it's really more about actively listening and not selling or demoing the technology that you've already built. Now, when Abdel and Sprinthub approached us to requested us to deliver this webinar, obviously we weren't just going to come and talk about something that's not been tried and tested internally itself. So just within the last few years itself, within Microsoft, we've had so many products and features across the cloud division that have been built using this methodology. And these are just some examples. And as you can see, they've been receiving some rave reviews across the industry. And, all of these were built with the customer in mind. And that's kind of why these have actually been doing, so well. And as we say here, it's kind of used by thousands of customers around the world. So with that, now that I've kind of given you an introduction, a high-level introduction to the methodology, what is it all about? Let's kind of dive in and kind of see how this works. Again, the key word or the key phrase is validate your assumption. Remember I said at the start, never to build something based on your idea. Everything is an assumption. So you start with your assumption, you create a testable hypothesis, or a prototype, and then you run experiments to test it. You interview customers, partners, you capture your qualitative and quantitative data, and based on what you see, you either iterate or you pivot. Now, let's also be very clear that this whole exercise isn't really about how many of your assumptions were correct or wrong. There's no such thing as a failed interview, for example. We sometimes have people that come out and say, well, I had all these hypotheses in my mind and I went in there and I validated it with a customer, and unfortunately, the customer didn't want that thing. That's fine. There's no such thing. I want to be very clear. There's no such thing as a bad customer interaction. In my opinion, the only bad customer interview or experiment or interaction that you had was one where you did not get any insights. Okay, let's be very clear. But if you've got this framework in mind of how the experiments work, you apply this validation method across the 4 stages. So the first stage is, who is your customer? Do we for sure 100% know who our customer is? Well, guess what? Whoever you believe is the customer target profile of your product, that's an assumption too. So before we start validating ideas and assumptions with customers, let's make sure that we're talking to the right kind of customers. And this is so very important, because I always say this, that sometimes it's better that you don't interview potential customers than interview customers with a wrong profile, because that can completely skew your data. So you start by, again, gathering assumptions about your customer and partner. And then you create a screener, as you can see on the right side of the screen. And you create a screener not based on a title that you see on LinkedIn or who you believe is going to use your product, but you define your customer as someone who can benefit from your product and services, because that will help them in their most commonly performed or primary job. And we're going to focus more on that later. And then you recruit those customers, and then you begin to capture those assumptions and to kind of understand what exactly is the profile and if they can benefit from the experience that you're trying to build. Now, once we've identified our customer, we can now move to the next stage, right? This is really where you identify what you believe is the top problem to solve. Because let's be very clear, guys, if we had 100 hours a day, we could solve like every problem in the world. But unfortunately, we're limited for time. We can only do so much in a little amount of time. So what is it that you can do for the maximum impact? So what is the top problem to solve? So always start by listing out what you believe is their primary job and the problems you assume that they're running into. And then you build a hypothesis. I'm going to show you how to build a hypothesis, conduct interviews, get valid insights. You can also look at data, quantifiable data, like a survey or something. And then eventually you can kind of decide what the top problem is. You see references on that slide to the phrase job to be done. I'm going to be telling you what jobs to be done means in some upcoming slides. But the goal here of the first phase is learn from your customers. What are the jobs they do? What are the gains they get by doing those jobs? And what are the pains they encounter? Actively listen, learn the art of asking open-ended questions that dig for information to understand the whys and the hows. We're going to get to more of that, but more importantly, understand why a customer does something. Know that a gain or a pain that they encounter sometimes does not even have to do with functionality. There could be some emotional, there could be some sentimental, there could be so many different gains that a person does a specific kind of job. So once you've identified what the problem is, right, and you kind of know, okay, this is really what I want to go build, this is what I want to go solve, we are now at that step where we have enough data to solve for the customer's problem. But remember what I said. I said that it's not just about building a product that fixes a problem, but it's about giving your customer that lovable experience of wanting to use your product or service again and again and again. And this is where, again, in my opinion, customer centricity comes in. For several of us, and I know so many big companies were guilty of this too, we would go, okay, so we know what the customer's top problem is. Let's go build something in the next few months and give it to the customer. What ends up happening is, you got it, good old assumptions. You have an idea that X, Y, and Z might solve a customer's problem, and so you go build it. But why? Because you fell in love with your own solution idea. So what the experiments methodology endorses is to try it in a different way. Even if your idea of a solution is just that, guess what? It's still an idea, an assumption. So go validate your solution, test a solution hypothesis with a customer, iterate until you land on the perfect customer experience. Because if you don't do this, you're going to fall into a trap of several companies. You will create something, you're going to toss it over the fence, hoping your customers like it. And when you're not seeing enough usage, what do? You end up spending more time on selling and promotion and marketing and convincing your customer that they should have been using your product or service to solve their problem. But instead, let's leverage the power of the experiments methodology to build that experience with the customer. Work with the customer to help them build that experience as well. The experience that will not only solve that problem, but delight them in using it and wanting to come back and use it again. And that's how you grow your customer base, your loyalty. And you know what, from a metrics point, especially as a lot of us are working on the cloud these days, that's how you grow consumption. And finally, let's assume you've got all of that done, you're now at a stage where you have a validated concept. What you can now do is confidently start to build prototypes, test the prototypes or the MVPs with your customers and partners, and evaluate against the measures you selected. Do you remember at the start when I was talking about customer obsession, there was a line there that said, measure what matters. So make sure that you know what matters both to your industry, to your own company metrics, as well as to the customer. And what's the end goal? What's the output of this particular slide? It means that you are now ready to build your MVP. You're going in with a lot of confidence, given that, I guess in simple English, you have the truth. You've got the customer data, you've got the customer insights. And I don't know if you guys realized it so far, but as I've kind of walked you through this experiment journey, do you know what the coolest part is so far? That so far, you haven't committed to writing code. You haven't committed to getting a lot of money to go build something successful that probably would not have been successful. All you've been doing so far is spending time and maybe a few sheets of paper. And also to kind of take a step back and keep it on this theme, what's common in all of these four phases? A, you've validated assumptions at every stage. And what's the other part that's common? You kept the customer along yourself for the journey. They were part of the journey. So this is an kind of an overview of what the experiments methodology is like. Now, I did say you probably kind of heard about these concepts. I was, kind of presenting my slides. So what we're going to do now is in the next few slides, we're going to look a bit into these concepts because these are super, super crucial to guide you on your journey, right? So the most important part, as I said, is understanding what a customer's job is. What does this diagram say? Basically, what it says is that manufacturers don't necessarily want a quarter-inch drill. All they want is a quarter-inch hole. And they have many options for making a hole. They could cast it in place, they could punch it out, they could laser cut it, machine cut it, mill it, use electrical discharge machining. They could do so many things. So what are we trying to say here? It's not about your quarter-inch drill, right? Now, this is kind of really my personal opinion, but just the other day I was having a conversation with a friend really around Blockbuster and Netflix. And I think we all know how successful Netflix has become. Why could that be? Because my personal theory would be Blockbuster, for example, focused on the task. Physical stores, driving in there and renting a DVD and, kind of making the store experience amazing, which I do think it was. But what did Netflix do? Netflix instead took a step back and it focused on the customer's job to be done. How do we get customers the easiest, nicest experience to consume entertainment? They started out with postal DVDs. Today they've got an app, and I think we all know that they've changed the idea of entertainment at home. So that is what I want you to think of. That's how I want you to think of a job. It is not a task. Know the difference as you're building a product before a job and a task. As an example, a job is sharing information. A task is sending email. So whilst it's really good to understand challenges that your customers is having sending email, true customer centricity, especially for those of you in early stage companies and startups, true customer centricity is when you learn about their job of sharing information versus sending an email. And so that's how I need you to think about a job. And why is this so important? Why is it important that you think about a job this way? Because remember, I spoke to you about a hypothesis. I will show you how you can take a job to be done and build a hypothesis based on that. As you've identified what your customers' problems are from some of the early stages of the experiments methodology, you build a hypothesis this way, the core to validating your assumption. And it has to be built around the job your customer's doing versus being customer-centric. So what does it look like? As you can see here, we believe that customers are most frustrated about a certain job because they're running into a certain problem, right? And here's an example. Now, the goal of a hypothesis is to build the foundation or the starting point for a discussion guide. So first of all, I keep talking about a hypothesis, but I want to be very clear. You don't share a hypothesis with a customer for two reasons. A, because you're kind of already leading them by asking them this question. But two, the goal is really to start getting insights. And so if you just go and show them a hypothesis, then you just end up getting a yes agree or a no disagree. So it's a starting point, which you will then use to build a discussion guide. And these are some real examples, by the way, of various groups within Microsoft that have actually built a hypothesis. As you can see, there's very little reference to the task, but it's really all about the job. As I said, remember, whenever you think about job and task, just kind of remember this. Sending email is a task, exchanging information is a job. That's how you think of it, right? So we've got the hypotheses, we've got the problem and all that nailed. Now comes the interesting bit. How do we go and kind of put this into action? What are people in so many groups across Microsoft doing? The most important part, as I said, and something that my partner in crime, Malgosia, leads in our program, is ensuring that you have got the right customers. I cannot stress this, honestly, in my opinion, this is 90% of the job done. So I'm lucky that I've got Malgosia to help take care of that for our program. Define the right screening criteria, always from a job to be done perspective. Find potential prospects. We get asked this question all the time. Malgosia spends so much of time on this. How do you go recruit customers? There is no one avenue. Depending on how well, depending on what you're building, depending on what your market is, you've got online communities, you've got Hangouts, and of course, in the post-pandemic world, that might change a bit. You've got friends, you've got co-workers, references. You can always use external recruiting companies. And I'm not obviously going into some of the other challenges such as data privacy and GDPR and everything, all the things that you need to check with your legal. And then you invite them to participate and you capture the contact information securely. Once you've got the right set of customers, you will then follow this process to start testing your hypotheses. Make sure you go in with your discussion guide. And how should a discussion guide be? First of all, no matter how well you know your product, no matter how well you know your customer, or how many years of experience you have, please, please, please always be prepared. Go in with a discussion guide. Avoid asking leading questions. Learn from open-ended questions. Probe for details, dig deep, ask why. Embrace silence, something several of us are not guilty of. Let the customer answer the question. And you know what? If a customer's quiet, it doesn't mean that they didn't understand the question. It just means they're thinking. So let them think. Avoid lengthy descriptions and examples. It not only confuses customers, but it's also very, very leading. Actively listen. Don't interrupt. And when in doubt, paraphrase. And most importantly, quantify consistently to identify both the frequency and the impact. How many times, for example, have we had a customer come up to us, especially if you've got a product in the market, and they go up to you and they say, well, you know what, this feature doesn't work, or this feature is painful. Yes, that is valid feedback. But as you thank them for the feedback, a very simple question you can ask them is just ask them, okay, so how often does this happen? Or what's the impact on a scale of 1 to 10, on a scale of 1 to 5? You'll be amazed at how this makes the customer think. And we've seen this happen ourselves. Customers then take a step back and they say, you know what? That wasn't the major problem to begin with. And if you want to know what a bigger and a more impactful and a more frequent problem is, this is what that problem is. And they tell you something completely different. So that's the thing. On a scale of 1 to 5, how often does it happen? Quantify consistently, because it's not only going to help the customer think, but it's also going to help you and them identify the frequency and impact. And once this is done, what you're going to do is kind of gather together as a team, distill all the insights that you learned from your experiments. You will analyze your quantitative results. Did you validate your hypotheses? If yes, great. Let's go to the next step of creating a solution. If not, that's fine. Adjust your hypotheses and retest. As I said at the start of this slide, what's better than failing faster is pivoting faster, right? So what did you learn? Now, let's assume the best case scenario. You went in with a hypothesis, you got your learnings, you validated it, and you're ready to go create a solution. What I told you about true customer centricity is that you just don't go dark, but even build the solution with your customers. And it always starts with ideas. And from ideas, you go in to what you call as the concept value statement. It's very simple. It's really just a verbal or a written description of a solution that emerged from your learnings and brainstorming, from the data that you collected with interviews and maybe any existing quantitative survey to kind of back up what you learned. And you will start testing these again with your customer to determine if you indeed believe that your idea of a solution concept is true. So yeah, you got it. Test your solution assumption by building a solution hypothesis. Once that is validated, you can use a storyboard to help explain the idea and get feedback on its value. And so this process continues increasingly, as you can see on the screen, with higher fidelity solutions like wireframes and prototypes, until you believe you've got a solution that's evolved into a shippable MVP. Now, in the previous section, I just showed you how to build a hypothesis for a problem phase. Guess what? You will now create a hypothesis for your solution phase. Its structure will be similar, but you're going to see that there are some kind of a few, I guess, minor differences. So this is what a proper form of a solution hypothesis looks like. We believe that a customer will solve a problem. This concept will solve a problem and be valuable to a customer in doing a certain kind of job, right? And as you can see, it not only talks about the gain, but it also talks about the pain that it's going to remove, right? Again, what I want to call out is it's all job related and not task related. It doesn't talk about a feature. So for example, the hypotheses that you see, you would not even know which company it came from, right? You could be in any company and you could use a hypothesis like this. It is that customer centric. And once this is done, again, don't spend your precious money and resources in going and building this dashboard that you see on screen. Instead, go in with a guide. So very simple. You just go up to your customer. You say, look, we understand this is your top problem. We brainstormed as a team. We've got about 4 to 5 different ideas, maybe. And these are those ideas. And we just like to ask you 3 very simple questions. Does this idea solve your problem? What are some benefits? What are some limitations that you get that you can potentially see from this? So make sure that it's a right solution fit to the problem that the customer is trying to solve. You'll be amazed sometimes at how the simplest of what you thought would be a very simple solution can actually end up being a problem. We've seen scenarios where, maybe some technology companies have wanted to build, a command script utility or something to go solve a problem that IT admins are having. And it turns out that the IT admin then comes and says, Yes, but I can't virtual private network and use an use the command prompt due to some regulations in my due to some IT problem rules in my company. So that's why it's so important to ask them, we think we want to build something like it. Will it solve your problem, limitations and benefits? Because once that's done, you can now confidently move to the next stage, which is storyboards. And what you're seeing here, by the way, is actually from a Microsoft group. So this was actually stuff, and I was actually on these phone calls. These were actually shown to top CIOs and CTOs of Dell and some of the enterprise companies, saying, look, we understand these are some of the problems that you're having with with your with your data servers, and some problems that you're having on device detection and everything, and trying to confirm that removable devices have been destroyed and non-accessible devices have been wiped. Would this be would this solution idea solve your problem? What I want to call out here is it does not even go into feature. It doesn't tell you how you're going to use the process. It just walks the customer through a regular day in their jobs. And again, show this to the customer. You'll be amazed at how the more organic it is, the more feedback you get from customers. And from here, once you know what you're trying to solve, you can now get into wireframing and prototyping. Remember, I was telling you that you don't have to code. All you've got to use is just a bunch of paper. So we've got examples of prototypes. This was actually built for an educational solution within the group that Malgosia and I work for, which is Azure Global. And this was where they kind of then built all of these on pages, sheets of paper, to sort of show what an experience of a learning solution might be. And from here, this was the final prototype and the wireframing. Now, this is a short 1-minute video, and you might notice that it is quiet, right? There is no voice in the background. And why is that? Because as you show this to your customer and what the experience will be like on using your feature, you don't want to be talking to them, because then you're going to be guiding them the wrong way, or you're going to be guiding them your way. You instead want them to see this video, and you want them to come up with their own. You want to hear their feedback. You want to hear about what they think of this and how they, what they think of this experience, how they feel it's going to be, any problems with it, and you just show them. So what they're trying to do in this scenario is what's on the left side is kind of a kiosk, and the right side is a mobile phone where you can physically go sync your courses and take those courses offline. And you're going to see a pause here. It's not because the screen is hanging, but they actually try to replicate what a wait for about 14 to 15 seconds might be before it picks up. That is it. That's simple. Do you guys notice that when we showed this, if you can imagine the scenario, we did not show this to, we did not have a fancy PowerPoint. Oh, when the team showed this to customers, they didn't have a fancy PowerPoint. They didn't have kind of a coded prototype. It was really that simple. But now, when they got feedback around this, they would be able to go in with a higher sense of confidence. And that way, when they start coding, they not only know that they're solving for the right problem, but they've also kind of come up with what might be the most impactful solution, most impactful experience. So what I want you to think of now that, through this whole journey is hopefully this methodology has given you better clarity of what you're building as a startup or an early stage company, or even an established one, a better clarity of how to think of what your target market is, but most importantly, a better better clarity of the immersive, lovable, and repeatable experience that your customers are looking for. So we have, again, we would like to thank you very much, and we'll be wrapping up soon, but we will open it up for Q&A. But before that, we do have a few call to action. Now, one of the most common questions we've received in the last 1.5 years, whenever we've presented this to startups in emerging markets worldwide, is, will this be shared? And hey, how do we get some of this goodness? So ultimately, our goal is to create a community where all of you, early startups, founders, CTOs of startups, venture capitalists in Africa, emerging markets, can kind of come together to share ideas, participate in discussions, and ask us questions really in a community-style engaged environment. So we are considering taking our methodology externally, for example, and kind of go into detail with what I just explained in about 45 minutes. So we want to reach out to as many people as possible to understand what we need to do to put together to make this effective. So if you are interested in being part of this community and giving us feedback on what it takes to kind of take this methodology outside of Microsoft, please send us an email, and that's the address. It's CP Engage. And I want to point out it's a single E, so it's CP Engage, and we'll keep you updated of our progress. And we might also request you for an interview, something, kind of to learn more on how to make our methodology, our experiments methodology, more impactful for this audience. Now, the second part, the second call to action is, as I said, we practice what we preach. And one of our goals, and what we're seeing a lot of teams in our cloud group do, is they're also reaching out to customers, including yourselves, to get feedback very, very early in the development process. Like literally before, as you've seen by now, before a single line of code's written. So if you want to participate in helping program, it only takes about 2 minutes of your time. So all you've got to do is click on that link, and we'll be putting it up in the chat window as well, to opt into that program. And we will reach out to you to invite you for engineering feedback sessions based on the interests that you indicate. We don't share this data with the sales group or the marketing group or anything. So please don't worry that that if you kind of put your name in here or something, that you're going to start getting phone calls from everybody. We make sure it is purely for engineering feedback. So with that, I would like to, I intentionally park questions in our Q&A till the very end, because normally what we've seen is sometimes the presentation itself answers a lot of questions that you had probably at the start. But I do very, very much want to thank you for this presentation. I would love to get in touch with all of you. So that's my LinkedIn profile. And with that, I will open it up for Q&A.
All right, Vic, thank you very much for this fruitful presentation where there's a lot of information to catch. And also we do have some question and a couple of questions from the attendees. If you don't mind, we can go on to the first question, which is from Khaled, and I'll print it here.
Sure. And I will just move to the chat window. Yeah.
You can see it on the screen.
Got it.
Yeah, it's how practically how practically we can test our product service with customer. Usually, customers are not easily willing to be engaged.
Yes. That is a really good question, and if it's any consolation, I think that's a problem all of us have. So please don't think that those of us that work in big companies have it easy. Customers, and especially now in these pre-COVID times, they being extra. Sorry, in these post-COVID, post-pandemic times, being extra, conscious of how they spend time. I will tell you this. You do not need to test your products with 20 to 30 customers. Now, depending on what you're trying to build, depending on the availability, and if you remember a point that I made in one of the earlier sessions of, one of the earlier slides of, I'd rather that you don't speak to customers than speak to customers the wrong profile. So if you have got the right kind of customer profile, I will say anywhere from 6 to 12 people should be more than enough. Now, obviously, this isn't part of the scope of this discussion, but then there are other things that we do internally where, for example, if you've got a deadline, right, and you've promised, somebody that you've got to get something out, there are other research techniques, such as cognitive walkthroughs, for example, that kind of help you heuristically experience yourself. However, please don't feel that you've got to interview 20 to 30 customers for every stage of your development. And then what I've also found is it also again depends on how you pitch it, because several times when we approach customers with, hey, we want to show the shiny thing, and we want to do a demo in a tech, customers are probably not that easy to engage, because they're probably going to think, oh great, they're going to show up and they're going to start showing off about their technology and kill me to death with a 20-slide PowerPoint. But instead, if you have explained why you're genuinely there, and that genuinely being, look, I want to build an experience that you can consume, so I need you to be my partner for the journey. Let's go build that experience together. And if you kind of position it that way, we've usually seen, even internally, the uptake and the response has kind of been stronger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Vic. We do have another question here from Mo. It's saying, how long should the product validation duration be? So how long is going to take to validate, or to say this product or this service, it's okay to go, or to develop at later stage?
Great question. And I think you're going to love the answer even more. And that answer will be as soon or as quick as it takes. We call these experiments for a reason. They're safe, they're quick. So for example, we have had some decisions that have been made in an enterprise as big as Microsoft. Sometimes people have used the experiments methodology. Within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they've got the data they've needed. It depends on how soon you can find customers, and it depends on the quality of conversations. Remember what I said at the start, which is, don't worry about whether you've validated or not validated a problem. What you need to worry about is, did you get the right kind of insights in the conversations that you had with customers? And as I said, if you've had meaningful customers, but if you've also got exposure to a larger base of customers, and you want to, and I do encourage you to look at the data, the telemetry, and kind of follow it up with a survey, then I will say that once you've got a great, because after a while, right, when you know you've nailed the right kind of profile of customers, you're going to start seeing themes. And that's kind of why, to the earlier person too, I said about sometimes even 8, 9 interviews is kind of enough, depending on how pressed you are for time. You will start hearing the same theme again and again, and that's kind of when you know what, I think I've got a great idea. And I know the word used was product validation, but I'm going to split it up into 2 parts, right? One is the problem validation, meaning am I building something to solve the right problem? And the second part will be the solution validation, which is, am I actually building an experience the customer likes? You'll start hearing themes, and your gut's going to tell you. It's that easy. And if you don't believe me, try it. If you go in with that open-ended discussion guide, you will see just how effective it becomes in hearing and being able to distill out some of those top themes, recurring top themes.
And I think it worth the squeeze, even if it take long time. It's always a good, very solid journey to spend the time on it, and to make sure that the result is going to be as fitting the customer requirement, I would say.
Yes, that is the most important part too. Thanks for mentioning that, Abdel. As I said, it's not about timelines. It's not about getting a product out. But if you're going to spend all that money, you might as well get the right thing out. And when I say the right thing out, something that solves the customer's biggest problem is something that can be the biggest benefit to the customer, but something that the customer wants to use again and again. And that is so right. And if you can go in grounded in that customer data, nothing more important, nothing more amazing than that.
Yeah, And I think also whatever you have customer to test with, and to bring them along the way with in your journey. Those customers, you're going to use them
Yes.
as a, I would say, as a solid customer, so you can pitch later investor or even an angel investor. However, there is always a difference between consumer and enterprise. So, for example, if you're going to go with your product, your service is going to be sold to an enterprise or B2B. So one customer or two, I think, is more than enough,
Yes.
especially when it's a solid or great customer. However, in consumer, as you said, like 10, 20 consumer, specifically people around you, taking in consideration sometimes there is a bias, behind, testing your product or service. So I think entrepreneurs need to consider all these parameters along the way, developing
Yes.
the journey. We do have another question, I think, from Abdul Hakim. Uh, how to get the right requirement from customer? I think wherever you engage customer, you're gonna hear something new. Maybe you consider it, maybe you didn't consider it. So how you can get the right requirement? So in order to develop the right product with the real, requirement or coming from customer.
Yeah. I just want to rephrase that question if you don't mind.
Hmm.
It's not about getting the right requirement from the customer. It's just about understanding the customer. What's the customer trying to do? Why is a customer doing something? And why is it important that a customer does that something? And that's what I spoke about a job. So if it's a task, right? For example, how do I create a brand new email server, for example? That would be kind of a spec discussion. But if you listen to your customer and if you kind of want to understand why is it that, because what does an email do or a text message on phone? It's sharing a message, right? Why is sharing information important? What's the important aspect of sharing information? And if you look at the world itself, we went from paper letters to email and I think we used to have those pagers and all that at one point in time. And now we have WhatsApp. You can talk to people in so many different. You've got mobile phones. Gone are the days where you had to be home to make a phone call. Why? Because it was not only about exchanging information, but exchanging information in a safe, efficient, and fast way. So what you need to understand from customers is not about requirements. Requirements are something you are going to work on, but all you've got to do is just listen to a customer. Ask them questions sometimes. What do you do? Why do you do? Why is it important to you? And if the customer may not be able to give you requirements of what you've got to go build, but a customer can definitely tell you, speak to themselves about what they're trying to do and the problems they're having. And then when we talk about development, right, where you're in the second phase of a solution, you don't have to ask them. As I said, even if you go in with simple sketches on paper and you say, look, would you just like a dashboard? Would you like a dashboard to solve your problem? You don't have to draw anything on it. You don't have to get into details like it's going to have two-factor authentication. It's going to be a Power BI dashboard. All that comes later. All you've got to do is, hey, customer, we've got about 2 or 3 ideas to solve your problem. Would you like a dashboard? Would you like a new feature on text messaging? Would you like a new command prompt? And you just go in with those visuals. Because what you're doing now is you're not asking the customer how to go fix it. You're just asking the customer, what would you like fixed? And what's the best experience possible for you? So that's how I want you to think about it. And if a customer, any one of us, we can always 100% speak about ourselves, why we do something, why we run into a problem, why it's even a problem in the first place, right?
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
don't think, for example, 20, maybe 30, 40 years ago, I don't know if someone had asked me, what are the requirements to build email? I don't know if I could have answered it. So that would have impacted the development. But if somebody had asked me, Vikram, you say exchanging information with your parents or loved ones or friends is important. what would you like? If you had a magic wand, what would you like? And I say, right now I'm sending letters. I live in America. My mom and dad live in Africa. It takes 2 weeks. I would love to be able to share some good news. Like if I got a promotion at work, I would love to be able to share that news quickly. That should then start giving you ideas of, okay, so this is a technology we have. This is our company's forte. Maybe we can think about some kind of electronic communication. And so you come back to me with ideas and you ask me stuff like, okay, Vikram, we've got a few solutions. Do you have a mobile phone? Do you have a computer? Do your parents back home have a mobile phone or a computer? And if the answers are yes, then you kind of present some ideas to me. You say, have you ever thought that you don't need to write anything anymore? You could use your mobile phone to send a message. So that's how you involve customers in the process, not asking them for requirements, not asking them what needs to be built, but just ask them, what experience would you like to use that can take away the pain that you're experiencing now?
Yeah, it's all about the why and not the what.
Yes, the whys, and yes, you can figure out the hows, but as I said about the why is that a problem? Why do you believe that's going to solve your problem in the most efficient, nice way?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have another one, which is basically, like engaging customers. Sometimes you think to sign an NDA with your customer or maybe your investor, and sometimes it's frustrating. Whatever you ask your customer, you're gonna bring them into your journey, and you ask them to sign NDA so to keep things confidential. So from my experience, I don't know, but from my experience, I don't think there is someone steal an idea from another one. It's all about execution. It's all about perseverance. Persistent on delivering the or executing the idea, but you know, kind of confidentiality, because there is a million or billion of ideas every day. So which one was executed is just very few. So what do you think, Vic, about that?
Yeah. What I think. Without, as I said, the word idea is because ultimately, let's remember something. If you think about it from a customer, you're not asking. So when you're talking to customers, I would not recommend that you go in and open up a discussion with, hey, what does our competitor do that we do a much better job of, right? Because all of us have competition. Whether you're a startup, whether you're an established company, we've all got competition. And even within the company, we've probably got competition too. So I'm going to turn it back to what I said. Ask a customer what they're trying to do and the experience they would like. Do not get into feature parity, because when you get into feature parity, you're not solving a customer. You're not solving a customer's true problem. You're just trying to go get one up on another feature. And I know this is unfortunately a Microsoft product, and I hate to bring it up, but in the spirit of kind of being transparent, one of my favorite examples is unfortunately the Microsoft Zoom player. Back in the day, my opinion as a consumer, not as a Microsoftie, but as a consumer, is I had bought the Zoom, and at the time it was kind of released as as a competition to the iPod. And I remember all the ads would talk about how, iPod's got the click wheel, and then all the reviews would say, well, this one's got like the buttons and everything. But that was a great example of where there was feature parity, or where we were trying to kind of match with a feature without seeing the job to be done. And you know what the most amazing thing for me as an iPod user at the time was? The fact that we had a back catalog, like the iTunes music store, was so comprehensive. You had global music. They were connected to countries all across the world. Zune, unfortunately, did not have that kind of backing, and that was one of the reasons why it, was not very successful. So it's not about a stolen idea or anything. All it comes down to is just getting close to your customers, asking them what the biggest problem is now, and what the experience is that they would like to solve. That's it. That's how I'm going to answer that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Agree on that. Yeah, it's all about execution and idea. You can come up with like 20 idea every day. So
Yes.
I think at this stage we don't have another question. Maybe Maglosia has something to say, or maybe I don't know. Maybe she want to ask a question. I don't know.
Sure. I actually have something to say, if you can hear me. Again,
Yes.
I want to remind anybody who's interested to experience these sort of things firsthand to sign up to be part of our database so we can reach out to you and invite you to the conversations or feedback sessions with our engineering folks across all of the cloud organization in Microsoft. It's a very simple way. All you do is go to customercocreation.microsoft.com. The link will be shared with you. Abdul is going to drop it in the
Yeah.
chat for you guys. So please take a moment, tell us what you are interested in, tell us about your technology use, and the next time we have the right opportunity, we are going to send you an email, tell you what it is, which team wants to engage with you, and then you'll have an opportunity to speak on the phone with the PM from that product or feature or scenario or solution, whatever's being discussed. So we really want to encourage you to take a step. And again, the other thing is for anybody who's interested to speak to us, myself and Vikram, about the framework and the methodology, please send an email to cpengage@microsoft.com. Let us know, and we'll be back in touch with you. And thanks again for attending.
Yeah. So I think we come to the end of this session. So I would thank so much Vic and Maglosia for the presentation and for making this happen. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Vic, so
Yeah.
take care and just stay safe.
Great. Thank you so very much again, Abdel, for the, sorry, I just got distracted for a minute. Thank you so very much for the opportunity. And again, all of you, Malgosia told us how to get engaged with us. And, we genuinely have seen benefits in this across Microsoft, as we showed you the different products that have been released using the experiments methodology. And we do believe there is potential for us to take this externally, but we want to experiment this experiment, which is rather than just taking what we've got from Microsoft and putting it out there because it might not work, for the scale of a startup or something, we would love to hear from you around some challenges that you have, so that way we can build an experience for you. So we want to validate it with you before we go build something for the external world. So thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. And I, again, look forward to being in touch with all of you. Thank you. And thank you, Abdel, and to the great team at Sprinthub. Thank you.
Thank you. So merci beaucoup à tous. Donc, so see you. Take care.
Bye. Au revoir.
Au revoir. Bye-bye.